Recreation and Park Association. I know a lot of people on the call, but we do have some new friends from Arizona on the call, so we welcome them. This is hopefully the beginnings of what's going to be a really good sharing opportunity across the states as we do more and more free webinars online. So welcome everybody. For those of you like me that have chlorine running through their blood, this is a great opportunity to learn more about the code and have a discussion about how that relates to the laws in Maryland. So Tara, I'm going to let you do the introductions.
All right, great. Thanks, Chuck. Well, hello, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Maryland Recreation and Parks Association, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, exploring the CDC's Model Aquatic Health Code and its impact on swimming pool operations. We just, as a reminder, want to ask that everyone mute their computers and to stop their video so that we can limit the distractions to our speakers throughout the presentation. There will be opportunities for participants to ask questions. We would ask that you enter any questions that you may have throughout the presentation in the chat box, and Adrienne and I will take a look and ask questions as appropriate during the presentation as well as after on your behalf. We have two wonderful speakers with us from the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code. We have Christy Reister, the Executive Director, and also Dewey Case, the Technical Director. So thank you again for participating, and I'll turn it on over to Christy.
All right, thanks so much, Tara, and thank you so much to the Maryland Recreation and Parks Association for asking us to come on and share this information with you all, and then allowing us to share it with our networks as well. So we're really excited to be here, and this is a really important topic. And of course, we will also be, I know a lot of people have reached out to us. We've done some other webinars through the CMAHC regarding COVID-19. And I know you guys have some questions about that as you guys are reopening. So we'll definitely dive into some of that as well, and hopefully answer all your questions. And if anything comes up, please let us know throughout the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer those. So again, my name's Christy Reister. I'm the Executive Director for the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code. I actually joined the team. It's been just about a year now. I joined last year, and it's been so exciting to get back into aquatics. This is my passion. It's where my career started. I have, 20 years of experience working in aquatics and parks and recreation, managing, anything from, facilities that had 7 pools, spas, the whole gamut of aquatics facilities, splash pads, design and construction as well, and then parks, recreation, libraries, and special events. So I have done it all when it comes to parks and recreation. Actually, I'm very passionate about it. You can see my family here on the right. My husband Troy and I actually met on the pool deck, coaching swimming together. So of course, it's just been, the pool is home for us. And then we live here in the Phoenix area with our daughter Jillian. So I also am very passionate about helping others achieve their goals. I work with organizations and teams to do team building and leadership training. I do executive coaching, customer service training. So if there's anything that I can help you all with, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And with that, I will pass it on to Dewey to introduce himself.
Thank you, Christy. So I'm Dewey Case. I'm the Technical Director for CMAHC. I've been here since around January. It's a little bit over 6 months into it. A lot of different aspects to my role with CMAHC. One of the largest from the industry perspective is support, where I'm here to help you as pool operators. So please feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions you may have. That's one of my functions. I've been in the aquatics industry professionally for over 20 years. Paraprofessionally, by the time you throw in lifeguarding, my college work and some service work, for almost 30. Definitely, I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm definitely an aquatics lifer. In addition to my role with CMAHC, I'm an active operator managing 2 YMCA pools at my home in South Mississippi.
All right. Uh-oh. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is weird. I don't know why. For some reason, my slides don't want to advance. Let me try something else here. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, what is the MAHC? So the MAHC stands for the Model Aquatic Health Code. It's a voluntary model public pool and spa code. It's based on science and best practices. It originated with some calls to the CDC from public health officials and people from the aquatics community, and the CDC realized that there just wasn't an all-inclusive code, and that there were so many questions coming up. So they partnered with a national consortia of public health folks, industry folks, designers, builders, and the Model Aquatic Health Code was born. And so the first edition was released in August of 2014. It was originally on a 2-year update schedule. So the second edition came out in July of 16. And then the third edition, which is what we're currently using, came out in July of 2018. And we go through a rigorous process. I'm sure, Dewey would love to explain that to you with our review. And we are currently under review right now. We are actually now on a 3-year cycle. And so the code is being, people and members were able to submit any changes or updates they felt were relevant. And we're going through, our technical review committee is actually going through all of those suggestions now, and we will have our conference in October. It won't be in person this year. We're bummed about that, but we will be hosting a virtual conference, and we'll have more information on that soon. But we'd love to have you participate and provide your input. So the MAHC also helps local and state authorities and the aquatic sector make swimming and other water activities healthier and safer. It is an all-inclusive code. And states and localities can use it. So it's, if your state necessarily hasn't adopted it, local municipalities can adopt it, counties can adopt it, and you don't have to adopt all of it. You can adopt portions of it. And something that Dewey will talk a little bit more about as we move through the presentation is, how as an operator, how is somebody that's managing facilities can use it to help reduce risk and manage your facilities as well. So obviously it helps reduce risk for outbreaks, drowning, and pool chemical injuries. It saves resources, so there's no need to reinvent codes in each jurisdiction. You can adopt what you like, you can adopt what works. I know we talk with a lot of agencies that have outdated pool codes and are looking for guidance. And so our code is free. It's on our website, and anyone can print it off. Anyone can look at it. We have a great feature on our website where if you're looking for, information on cryptosporidium, let's say, you can actually just go into the search bar and type in cryptosporidium, and everywhere that it comes up in the code, it will pop up for you. Another really great feature is, obviously there's a lot of areas where cryptosporidium comes up. And so the CDC has done a really amazing job and created mini MAHCs. And in these mini MAHCs, so there's a one on cryptosporidium, and it has like everything you need from the MAHC in one mini MAHC. And so we're trying to build more of those to help people focus on certain areas. So those have been a really amazing resource, and those are all available. There's links to those on our website as well. Another thing that's great about the MAHC is that it's all inclusive, and it addresses design, construction, operation, maintenance, policies, and management of public aquatics facilities. So it has everything you need all in one spot. So what is the CMAHC? The CMAHC is the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code. We were created in partner with the CDC to help keep the Model Aquatic Health Code up to date with the latest science and the best practices. We help manage the MAHC update process, which, as I mentioned, happens every 3 years. Our triennial vote on the code conference is scheduled for October. We're still trying to work out the final dates as we've changed it to a virtual conference this year. So we're hoping to have our information out at the beginning of July for all of that. So please be looking out for that. You can always sign up for emails on our website to get the latest information, and anytime we send out a release or information on when these things will be happening. So we'd love to have you be part of that. We are involved in cutting edge research. We are working on an indoor air quality study in partners with Purdue University, which has been a great partnership. So we're always looking at pulling in the greatest minds of science and helping solve problems that we have in our facilities. We also help with MAHC adoption. We work with states and counties and local cities that are considering adopting the MAHC and help them provide any information we can, and help support them, whatever we can do. If they need us to be at meetings, if they need support, whatever we can do to help encourage adoption. And of course, we have membership, and we'd love for you to become a member today and be a part of our organization and get the latest information and be part of our, be a voice as on the vote and to update the MAHC and really get your information out there to our community. So with that, I will pass it on to Dewey.
Great, thank you, Christy. So, the big question is, how does the MAHC impact our aquatic operations? One thing to keep in mind with the MAHC, and Christy mentioned this earlier, is when we look at the revision schedule, we bring together a group of individuals from across the industry, from all sectors. So it's not just a manufacturer, it's not just operators, it's not just public health. We bring all of these people together in our technical review committee, which oversees the entire revision process, and also our technical support committees, which are ancillary committees that help guide the review process. And finally, the most significant thing about the update process is that the entire industry has a voice. It is created in the open, it's transparent. There's multiple sources of feedback over virtually an entire year, from the change request process all the way down to member comments, the TRC review process, which is available for viewing by CMAHC members in the industry, as well as a second round of comments, and even going up to caucusing when we come to the vote on the code. So over the course of any given year, when we do the revision, the industry itself can drive the MAHC, which in itself has a huge impact on operations. So Christy, next slide, please. So just as mentioned, the revision schedule, this in itself makes us an industry leader. Again, as the entire aquatics industry, from the chemical manufacturers to you as operators, a lot of time as operators, sometimes we don't think we have a voice, but we do. There's plenty of information there where you as an operator can become educated on any of the given topics. We have plenty of guidance from the TSCs and TRCs, which are made very transparent, very visible. And then your vote matters. As Christy mentioned earlier, another way that the MAHC impacts operations is that it's comprehensive. It's a one-stop shop, so to speak, in that you as an operator, if you need to update your facility, there's code for that in the MAHC. There's guidance for that in the MAHC in a design and construction process. If you're wondering about water quality, how can you have the most outstanding water quality possible? What are best practices? What does the science say? We have sections there as well. And then one thing that is missing from most of the major codes is we have actually a management section where the MAHC guides training program development as well as facility management, most notably with its safety plan. It's also referenced to one degree or another by virtually all the major organizations. And some organizations, they acknowledge that it is the model code. And some organizations certainly weigh heavier on the MAHC, but the entire industry recognizes the input and impact the MAHC has on the aquatics industry as a whole. Another key aspect of operations is that in litigation, it's frequently referred to by expert witnesses along with the local code. So that in itself gives it tons and tons of credence, in addition to the scientific background, in addition to the best practice background, in addition to the industry input. You know, bottom line is, if you as an operator want to follow the most up-to-date code there is, that is going to meet or exceed your local codes and position your facility to really excel at operations, you definitely want to be referring to the MAHC. And obviously, in addition to your local code. Next slides, please. So in short, the MAHC has become a major standard. It is definitely a force to be reckoned with. The regular updates to reflect the best practice, the best science available, you know, is an ongoing process. So it's always evolving. And one other thing about the MAHC is the MAHC seeks for evolution. The MAHC is not trying to upend the industry and cause major upheavals. The MAHC wants to have a nice evolution based on science, based on data, and where that's not available, based on best practice. So really, really important that we look at the MAHC and look in our operations. So in short, you know, how does the MAHC impact aquatic ops? In virtually all ways. You know, again, there's virtually no topic that's left uncovered, and it's an excellent, excellent, excellent resource for us as operators. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, and we tend to see this, is the MAHC can be intimidating because it is a massive document. It is very, very comprehensive. Keep in mind that as operators, when your facility is already built, the design and construction section, there may be some things that refer to, but that's largely done. So that section comes into play when you're looking at altering the facility, whether you want to add secondary disinfection, whether you want to, you know, add spray features, or whether you want to do a renovation. So that's where that particular section comes in. You know, when we look at operations section, there's a lot of information there, from UV to ozone, all the way down to filtration, recirculation. You know, when we look at that, and you start breaking it down in individual components, it makes it much easier to sort through and much easier to manage as an operator. So the same way you eat an elephant is the same way you read the MAHC. You take it in sections, you find out what's applicable to you, and then just as the MAHC evolves with the industry, you also can evolve with the MAHC, both in accentuating your understanding, whether it be through the annex or just improving your aquatic operations. But please don't be intimidated by the size of it. Once you start digging in, it really becomes pretty straightforward, and I won't say simple, but it really does become more user-friendly the more you work with it. And there's tons and tons and tons of excellent information to be had. So with that being said, we want to talk very quickly about aquatics in the age of COVID-19. Again, as part of our role as CMAHC, we're industry support. And it's our understanding, based on conversations with MRPA leadership, that Maryland is getting close to reopening their facilities. So we want to share a few things with you that, you know, we've been addressing from various resources, various agencies over the last couple of months. Christy, if we could advance to the next two slides. So when we think about aquatics and COVID-19, you want to promote behaviors that prevent the spread. And there's tons and tons and tons of information to be found on this. We also recommend that you go and visit cdc.gov/coronavirus. When you go to that page, you can find a section on communities. Go to the Parks and Rec, and if you haven't already seen it, there is a section for aquatic venues, and that represents the latest up-to-date information from CDC on reopening for COVID. So some other priorities that we have are maintaining healthy environments, maintaining healthy operations, and then preparing for when someone gets sick. Now, just a forewarning, the next several slides are condensing the information that we have from the CDC. So we definitely want to refer you to that CDC document for reopening aquatic venues. Definitely want to refer to you there. Next slide, please. So when we talk about, preventing the spread, when we talk about, preventing COVID and continuing to flatten the curve, obviously basic hygiene is critical. When we talk about hand washing, covering your face when coughing or sneezing, even if you're not symptomatic. You want to make sure that you have for your staff and patrons, that you have adequate hand washing, adequate sanitizing supplies. The big thing is, again, the CDC recommends wearing face coverings whenever you are not in the water. This includes lifeguards on stand. One side note here, there have been some products that have been promoted that appear to be user-friendly in the water, but the official position is don't wear a face mask in the water for obvious reasons, as that water can become waterlogged and difficult to breathe through. As you're looking at reopening, you want to create educational opportunities for your staff or patrons and swimmers on when to stay home, including when they're symptomatic or have had a positive test, or they've been exposed to a COVID-19 patient, and then they want to isolate for 14 days. And then also create signs and messaging, including social media posts, including physical signs, soft nudges like the signs we see on floors at big box stores, using the PA to make regular announcements, as well as other physical barriers. Next slide, please. When we talk about maintaining healthy environments, you want to, at a minimum, clean and disinfect high-touch surfaces. Now, this is important. The virus can be covered up by dirt and debris and other material. So you have to clean, then sanitize. And the recommendation is at least once daily. Now, you're going to have to look at your operations and identify what exactly are high-touch surfaces, because that's going to vary from facility to facility. You're also going to have to identify what surfaces of these need to be cleaned more frequently. For example, if you have the ability to have one rescue tube per lifeguard on duty, then that's a high-touch surface, but the frequency of cleaning can be once a shift, once a day. Whereas with a door handle or as a rail, you want to consider having a much higher cleaning frequency. You want to use an EPA list-in disinfectant that's appropriate for your venue. You want to maintain social distancing by using modified layouts, by using soft nudges, like I mentioned earlier, by using physical barriers and physical guides. And then also identify objects that are difficult to clean and sanitize, and consider removing those from circulation or removing those from access. These might be kickboards, these might be pool buoys. These would definitely be shared items like goggles out of the lost and found bin. Those kind of personal items. You definitely want to consider that. And where you do have things in play like life jackets, you may want to consider having kind of a rotating stock where some are clean and ready to use and others are scheduled to be cleaned. So you really just have to look at your various operations and identify what's important for you. Next slide, please. When we come to, again, maintaining healthy operations, the big key here is protecting our vulnerable staff. And we do this through a variety of non-punitive HR procedures and accommodations. We want to make sure that the lifeguard is not enforcing social distancing, hand washing, or other preventative measures. The lifeguard's job is to watch the water and prevent drownings and respond to emergencies. You need to have a separate staff person that is going to monitor social distancing and those other protocols. As I just mentioned, you want to develop HR protocols and screening that are non-punitive for staff that are concerned for COVID-19. You want to make sure that your screening staff using an appropriate questionnaire and also temperature checks. You want to create isolation protocols. What if a staff member suddenly becomes symptomatic? What if a swimmer becomes symptomatic while on site? You want to create protocols to where that person can be isolated, to where the area and things that come in contact with can be cleaned, and also where you're notifying public health officials to where they can perform any necessary contact tracing. One thing to keep in mind is that the CDC recommendation, when you are cleaning behind someone that has been identified as having COVID-19, you want to wait 24 hours before cleaning. You also want to follow social distancing guidelines and gathering limits. Next slide, please. So CMAHC, in its service to the industry, reached out to our membership earlier this year, and we surveyed for a list of questions to where we can help others reopen their pools in the safest manner possible. So the next two slides have a list of frequently asked questions from that webinar. It's my goal and my hope that by answering some of these frequently asked questions, that we can set the Maryland pools up for an easier start. So the first question was, how does chlorine and COVID-19 interact with each other? What are minimum levels? Should I run higher chlorine? Should I hyperchlorinate more frequently? The data shows that a minimum chlorine level, code-compliant chlorine level, quickly kills COVID-19. In addition to that, you also have dilution factors to where as the virus gets in the water, just like other pathogens, it quickly dilutes. So between those two factors, no, there is no need to run higher than normal chlorine levels. There also is no need to hyperchlorinate more frequently. You still may need to hyperchlorinate, but that's going to be along your traditional lines for chloramine removal, for removal of visible green algae, and other similar circumstances, not for COVID-19. We've seen come up on several occasions, people asking, can I use pool water as a disinfectant? Pool water is not an approved disinfectant for COVID-19. And there's a big distinction here between the water being safe and the water being used as a disinfectant. The pool water does not have a high enough chlorine concentration to get the required instant kill for COVID-19. It's certainly safe from a regular user standpoint, but as far as that contact kill time, that's not going to be appropriate. So no, pool water cannot be used as a disinfectant. The data behind UV rays and sunlight is ongoing. There is some data that shows that it does kill the virus. However, it's not an instant kill time. So even for items that are in sunlight or exposed to UV rays, you still want to follow appropriate cleaning practices using a list N disinfectant from the EPA. A couple of lifeguarding questions we've gotten, is what about lifeguards and water rescues? If you have a lifeguard that is hesitant to provide care because of COVID-19, then obviously you need to pay attention to that lifeguard. But at the end of the day, if the lifeguard is in the stand, they're legally obligated to perform the rescue and use their skills to save that person's life. So if a lifeguard is unwilling, then you definitely need to consult with HR and consider whether or not that person needs to be on a shift or a rotation until they're willing to provide care. But again, lifeguards, regardless of the situation, if you have a pool that is open, they must provide care, they must perform water rescues, they must perform resuscitative skills and first aid skills as required. That is not optional. There are some PPE modifications that you would make for lifeguards. The first is per the American Heart Association and CDC recommendations, using a BVM prioritized over resuscitation mask, and then also using a viral filter for your equipment. The viral filters, they're backlogged, but they are available, and they can be easily retrofitted to fit between the one-way valve and the body of the resuscitation mask, or the mask and the body of the BVM. We see a lot of questions about lifeguards and in-service trainings. Can we do this? You know, it is recommended that you bring lifeguards in for in-service training prior to reopening to make sure that they are rescue ready and ready to provide care. You do need to look at your social distancing guidelines. Social distancing guidelines may make it difficult to perform in-service trainings as well as lifeguard training. But there are unique ways where it can be done using virtual platforms. That's going to be the most expedient way. And I would recommend that you look into that as feasible for your organization. When it comes to splash pads and other water features, the big thing to determine is, do you have the capability to adequately disinfect those high-touch surfaces? From the water itself, if you're maintaining proper code, especially if you're using UV sanitation, which is highly recommended in the MAHC for splash pads and for interactive water features, and required by law in some areas, then the water itself is going to be safe. It's just a matter of the contact areas and maintaining those being clean and disinfected. Remembering that water in itself is not an adequate sanitizer or disinfectant for surfaces relating to COVID-19. There have been some questions about, can you modify your spray features? You want to be careful about any modifications and consult the manufacturers, in that by modifying the spray feature, you may be trading off a possibly lower risk of exposure for COVID-19 to a higher risk of other injuries by an improper modification. So definitely consult your manufacturer. When it comes down to indoor and outdoor pools, there is no difference. Indoor-outdoor pools from a COVID-19 aspect operate the same manner. You're still going to disinfect, clean, and desanitize high-touch surfaces. You're still going to maintain minimum chlorine levels, appropriate pH levels. So from that aspect, there really isn't a difference in operating the two facility types. Next slide, please. Oh, and it looks like we have a double slide. Okay. So we've also thrown up here a list of CDC COVID-19 resources for you to refer to, and these give you the latest and best guidance. So just kind of wrapping up before we go into a couple of Q&A session, or a Q&A session that we have slated. You know, the MAHC is becoming the industry standard. And I'm obviously a MAHC supporter. I have been from very day one. I was involved in the Lifeguarding and Bather Supervision Technical Committee for the first edition. And I can attest from my years of work with the MAHC that the thought and the attention to detail and the dedication from the scores of volunteers, over 140 that worked on the first edition, the scores of volunteers over the years is just very, very impressive. And it is definitely, for every good operator, it's definitely a document to have on your computer, printed out for easy reference, and one to reference frequently as you seek to have the highest quality operations, the best water quality, the highest standard of care, and the safest pool, not only from a drowning and bather injury standpoint, but also from a public health aspect, and just having safe, healthy water. It's definitely something that as operators, we should all have on our shelves. With that being said, I'll turn it back over to Christy.
All right. Thanks, Dewey. Okay, well, with that, I don't have anything else. We wanted to make sure we had enough time for any questions. I know, you know, as you get ready to open, there are so many questions about COVID and safe practice. We do have our information here on this last slide if you want to reach out to us anytime. We're happy to answer any questions. You can also find all of our information on our website at CMAHC.org. So it's at CMAC.org. And again, please sign up for be on our email list. And as soon as we have any updates or anything that we put up or put out there, you'll get notifications. So you'll know if there's any new guidance or anything posted. We also have a special COVID-19 resource page on our website. There's a banner at the top right when you go to our site to get any up-to-date information there as well. So any questions?
Christy, we did have a question that was asked by Jen Mogus, and she's saying that it can be fiscally challenging to bring older facilities into compliance. And what is your recommendation for coming up with a multi-year plan along with influencing leadership to go above and beyond what the current local codes require?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'll share my thoughts. And Dewey, please chime in as an operator yourself, anything that you suggest. And I think that you know, your best thing to do is to list all of the things that you would like to change or like to update, and start with the most important first. And you know, put it as part of your capital improvement plan. You know, talk to your director, talk to, you know, your leadership, and let them know how important it is. We are also an available resource if there's any presentations we can put together and help you with, and we are happy to help anyone that is looking to adopt pieces of the MAC, you know, want to update, like as you mentioned, things in your facilities. We are happy to help. We are here for you, and happy to provide any resources or presentation information that you need to provide to your student council or your directors. But my suggestion is to kind of list out all of those things that, you know, are critical pieces, and prioritize them, and just, you know, add them into your capital improvement plans.
Yeah, I would second that. I want to share my perspective. One of my facilities is about, at this point, 28 years old. So a good 20 years old when the MAC first edition was adopted. When I started looking at getting my facility MAC compliant, the amount of money I had to spend was around $1,000. I'll put a little dramatic pause in there on purpose. MAC compliance does not have to mean that you're investing $200,000. Now, if you wanted to go through, if you do have an older facility, and when I say older, we're going to need to talk about order of decades. And you're using maybe an old rapid rate sand filter, which has a very low micron filtration rate, or very high micron filtration rate rather, you know, that's going to be expensive. But for most of our facilities that have been built within the last 30 years or so, it's going to be pretty close. So take some time, dig through the MAC, start off, if you have an existing facility, start off with the easy things. start off with what's feasible for you to do right now. Things like filtration systems, changing pumps, changing filters, obviously that's going to be expensive. And if you're looking at having to do that, chances are you have some really old equipment to begin with, if it's not compliant. So start with the basics, start with the easy stuff, and then kind of phase in as you have to make repairs into being MAHC compliant. As far as influencing others, a lot of it is going to be you're having to make repairs anyway. And so you are talking with your leaders about, since this repair has to be made, here is the standard, right? And throw out some of those keywords like standard of care, throw out words like, public health. And that usually helps advance that discussion. I will say that in my experience as an operator, I haven't necessarily seen significant pushback when things need to be fixed. The biggest pushback is when you're trying to take an existing facility and do something radical. So for example, installing UV. That's definitely something that can be certainly supported for a spray pad because of cryptosporidium, because of outbreaks. But maybe for a 500,000 gallon, 50-meter pool, that's a little bit harder sell. Well, maybe you wait a little bit on that one, right? So definitely be judicious and definitely be strategic in what you're looking at and what you're wanting to include. But definitely plan it out and spend some time creating a plan well before you talk to your leadership.
Great. I think we have another question. Is the Model Aquatic Health Code referred to and weighed more heavily than local and state code in the court of law in terms of operator responsibilities and compliance? Can organizations be held more liable if they are not MAHC compliant but are compliant with their local and state code?
Whatever their jurisdiction's code is, what they would be expected to follow. We know from our colleagues that act as expert witnesses that it is referred to in court cases and is, a standard. And, you get, from what we have heard, and, I don't know, I haven't been an expert witness or been part of these, but from what we have heard from our colleagues, you can be held accountable for not, using best practice. So I don't know, Dewey, if you want to add anything to that, but I do know that it is kind of the standard in a lot of those cases.
Yeah, and the big thing is, are we talking about criminal or civil liability? With criminal liability, if you're following your local codes, and I'm not an attorney, and definitely not an attorney for Maryland, but if you're following your local codes, that's going to be kind of that particular standard. But when you talk about civil litigation resulting from injuries and illnesses, and you start getting in front of a jury, then that becomes, definitely a more interesting thing. And that's where expert witnesses can certainly use the MAHC as an industry best practice, industry standard to sway the jury in their favor. So yeah, even though it may not be an issue criminally, you can definitely see civil litigation that the MAHC becomes a power player regardless of what the local code is, especially since many of our codes across the country are not as comprehensive, are older, and have definitely older data sets and not the most current practice. So then a common strategy used is, making a point that the industry is aware of this document. So definitely need to consult an attorney on the specifics, but it's definitely a power player in litigation.
Great, thank you. An additional question that we have: how does the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code engage local and state code officials in terms of developing and or adopting current and future versions of the Model Aquatic Health Code?
Well,
Want to talk about the state designees?
yeah.
Okay.
We have a group called the state designees, and this is a representative from each state. We currently have a few vacancies that we're working to fill that comes together on a regular basis. We've been doing it monthly so far, and its whole point is to help further the MAHC, to help further connectivity, to discuss code-related issues, public-related health issues, and the end goal is 50 state adoption, in whole or in part. So we do have that group composed of public health officials from across the country, and that's where a lot of that work does, and will take place.
Great. And we want to remind everyone participating in the call, if you do have questions, please go ahead and enter them into the chat. We're checking them out there, and we'll be happy to ask them of Christy and Dewey. Our next question was, can you describe the Model Aquatic Health Code resource and the supporting annex a little bit more, and how those documents are used? Can you use one without the other? Should they be used together? Can you elaborate more on the resources available and how they're used?
Sure. Well, these are two separate documents. The code language itself is the primary document. That's where you're going to see the various practices and code entries for things like water quality, minimum filtration, lifeguard training programs, developing a bloodborne pathogen program, fecal response. That's where you see the actual practices and steps that we follow and we comply with to be compliant. Again, that's the primary document. The annex is a descriptive document. And so when we talk about the annex dives into the rationale behind various sections of code. It references science, it references data sets, and it really goes into that description. And again, where there's a code section that's based off best practices, oftentimes you'll see a section in the annex describing what the rationale was for that section. You can't use the annex without the code because the annex references many of the code sections. But do note there's not an annex entry for every section. But again, the code can be used separately. Now, here's my argument for having both. Right? A lot of individuals would just reference the code because we're busy, we're operating pools, we're staffing, we're training, we're teaching, we're trying to attend meetings. We tend to be very busy. But where the annex is critical for the operator is furthering your education, furthering your understanding. That's where the annex is really key. Let's take the question of cyanuric acid, which is definitely a hot topic. There's sections in the annex talking about cyanuric acid and all the various nuances to CYA. So if you want to educate yourself more on what some of those issues are, that's a great place to start. So as an operator, just referring to the annex, either out of need or just out of curiosity, can expand your knowledge so much and make you that much more confident of an operator in what you're doing. and also what you're defending in the event that your decisions are questioned.
Great, thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions from the chat. The first question is, are you able to tell us who our Maryland's state delegate is that works with the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code? And then the second question is, has the council considered creating a certifying program to accredit swimming pools that are MAHC compliant, similar to NRPA's CAPRA accreditation program?
Do you know who the Maryland representative is?
I'm looking it up right now. It
Why-
is Tommy McKenzie.
Okay, great.
And these, by the way, these are public health officials, so their information is readily available to you in the state through the state website. So I'm not necessarily going to give out his phone number that we have, but you can find Tommy through your Department of Health, and then coordinate with him on any MAHC-related issues as well.
Do you want to talk about the certification program?
I will. We do have a certification program. It's really more intended towards products and trainings than it is necessarily entire facilities. It's been on the books for a little while now, but earlier this year, we engaged in really fleshing out and growing that program. So right now we have a certification program for lifeguard training where we've certified 2 agencies, the first of which was Starguard Elite, and the second was American Aquatics and Safety Training. We're very proud that SGE was our first agency that we were certified because they've been supporters of the MAHC for a long time. But the certification process is also rigorous. So please don't misconstrue that they got a pass. With the certification progress, our process, whether it's for an online app, such as the Councilman Hunsoccer web-based app, facility app, or the lifeguard training programs, lifeguard supervisor programs, or pool operator programs, it's a difficult process to get through. Our one and only criteria is the MAHC. We don't look at training design. We don't look at the superficial fluff. We only look at, do they comply with the MAHC? It usually takes about 30 days for each program to be evaluated. And then it's common that there's a revision that has to take place to make sure that they're in full compliance. We have not talked about facilities and certifying facilities. That's something we can look at. I do have a concern about liability. And if we certify a facility, does that mean that we are now bound to them in the event of a drowning or other injury? So that's one barrier that may prevent us from doing that. But that's something we can certainly look at in the future.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Great. All right, our next question. As you all are working to update the next version of the MAHC, are you planning to include guidance on managing pandemics such as COVID-19?
So unfortunately, that will not be part of our update. And the reason why is that all the change requests, because as I mentioned earlier, we go through a rigorous process to update the MAHC, and all the change requests had to be turned in the first week of January. So we cannot consider, anything once the process closed for consideration after that. So it won't actually, it won't anything for how to handle pandemics or, COVID-19 in particular wouldn't be addressed until the next update to the code in 2023. we did receive, I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dewey, but it was over 500 change requests. So we do have an amazing group of industry leaders, public health officials that are going through all of those different change requests. And you know, some of them are grammatical things, like, you know, there was a comma missing, or, you know, change the word from should to shall, and things like that. But there were a substantial amount of things based on, you know, industry research and science that people submitted to be considered for updating. But nothing, unfortunately, with the timing of the process and, you know, to keep the integrity of our change request process, are not able to include anything on the pandemic. And I don't know, Dewey, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I will make it a little bit more specific. We have 530 change requests. And here's what makes the MAC revision process the industry leader, right? Everyone, now you do have to be a member of CMAC to put in a change request, but everyone can submit a change request. So you as an operator, if you see something in the MAC that you don't agree with, something that needs to be updated or something that needs to be added, as a CMAC member, you can put in a change request. And we look at each and every one. It's, I'm not sure how other codes are updated, but something unique for us is we just don't look at it and just say yes or no. I can tell you for this revision process, as well as the last, there have been many CRs that another code body would have looked at and said, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll pass this or we'll deny it. But that same CR with our process, we might have spent 3 hours deliberating it. So everyone's input is considered and everyone's input is valued. And some CRs that are appear to be a shut and close case really wind up being explored to great detail and deliberated by these great minds we have on the TRC. And that really is what makes our process special and unique. We don't dismiss anything. And any TRC member has the ability to bring up a CR for discussion. So it's really, really a detailed, difficult, and certainly, but interesting process that makes it very, very strong. And we're stronger because of it.
Well, and I'd like to add too, Dewey, that once it goes through that process, we present them at our vote on the code. And you don't have to be a member to participate. Really, you just have to be a member. And as Dewey said, you don't need to be a member to submit a change request or comment on a change request. But you do need to be a member to be able to vote on the change request. And, we do vet those at the conference. And then we submit, once the membership votes, and their voice is heard, we submit that to the CDC. And then it goes through a rigorous process. It goes through 3 different department approval processes at the CDC. And ultimately the CDC, decides on what the changes are going to be and produces the updated code. So I don't know if I left anything out, Dewey, that you wanted to add to that.
Well, I think that's pretty adequate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. The whole MAC process is really, really interesting. And there are many, many catch points to where crazy things or things that aren't science-based or aren't best practice-based can be caught and tossed out, very, I won't say very simply, but it keeps us from going really off the rails into strange territory.
Great, thank you both. So there is a question presented by a participant wondering if there are possibilities for an addendum around pandemic and addressing that, wondering if 3 years might be too long to provide information within the code.
Well, and that's why we have resources on our website, and we're working. I mean, Dewey and I meet with the CDC bi-weekly. So we are, we work with them, provide input. Obviously, they, work on these, the updates and things. And that's why we'll have them on our site and the best practices and the guidelines. But unfortunately, we will have to wait until the next update to the code to actually add anything into it.
Yeah. I will say that, CDC also is much more flexible in that range, in that they can react very quickly to pandemic and pandemic related issues. There's also a question of, is it appropriate, right? So the MAHC is a overall pool operation code, and certainly it's public health based. But there are some aspects where maybe it's not appropriate for the MAHC. For example, with the pandemic, the current pandemic, that's a very specific situation. And we know that current practices for chlorination, disinfection, filtration are they're very, very, very effective in neutralizing the virus. So there is a question about how much of it is appropriate for the MAHC versus letting the CDC as a public health entity react to pandemics as they come in a much more flexible and much more specific manner, if that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I don't see any more questions coming in for the chat, but I do have, I think, a final question for you too. Can you remind the group on where they can access the MAHC, and then also the best way to keep up to date on the work of the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code and updates to the code?
Sure. So if they visit our website at cmahc.org, so cmac.org, if you scroll down on that main page just a little bit, you can see where it'll say you like search the MAHC or view the MAHC. Just click that and it'll take you right to it. You can open the full thing, or as I mentioned, we have this really great tool on our website. So if you're looking for, what chlorine, what max chlorine levels should be, or anything on indoor air quality, or pool operation, or pool management, guidelines or things that we have in there, you can search whatever you're looking for. There's a great when you also go there, if you scroll down a little bit on the right, towards the bottom on the right, you can see where it'll tell you to sign up for email updates, and just provide your email there. And anytime we send out a press release or, update something, we'll send out an email notification. So you'll know when, new guidance is posted or anything like that, so you can stay up to date.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. I do want to clarify one thing just to make sure that there's no confusion, because I know I've ran across this with a couple of folks. The MAHC is not a product of CMAHC. CMAHC is a support mechanism for the code, to where we can keep it updated and provide industry support for it. The code is owned by the CDC. So just want to make sure that's clear. And when you click on the CMAHC website, that does take you to the CDC site where the MAHC is hosted.
Great.
Thanks, Dewey. Yes, we are a nonprofit organization that was purely created to assist the CDC with keeping the MAHC updated, managing the vote on the code process and all the committees and things like that. So we work hand in hand with them, with the latest research and science. So just kind of an assistant, to help them keep it updated.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Christy and Dewey. We appreciate everyone participating in today's Exploring the CDC's Model Aquatic Health Code and its impact on swimming pool operations. On behalf of MRPA's Education and Training Committee, as well as the Aquatics Professional Learning Community, we appreciate everyone's participation today, and please be on the lookout after the webinar for an online survey to provide us with feedback. We also would like to invite you to check out some upcoming webinars that we have going on Tuesday, June 30th. It's Recasting the Turfgrass Profession, and also Tuesday, July 21st, How to Build and Host a Fortnite Tournament from Start to Finish. So please enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and thank you all for joining us today.